So, Arturia released the 5.0 firmware update for this guy, the Microfreak synthesizer, which has introduced some really powerful sampling capabilities to the instrument. It now has a total of 4 sampler-based engines, including 3 that work with grains. So I immediately had to check the update out. I loaded it onto the Microfreak and started playing around. And I pretty quickly thought, because I've been getting into multi-sampling lately, I thought it would be a lot of fun to create my own samples for the Microfreak and see what I could do there. So I actually went ahead and sampled a few sounds that I designed from my Sub Phatty synthesizer in the back there and loaded them onto the Microfreak to try and make some presets with them. So I've now made 5 presets that use 3 samples that I've captured from the Microfreak. So 5 extra presets for the Microfreak. And these are all free. I'm basically offering this as a sort of update to my original free preset pack for the Microfreak, which had 20 presets. So now it's going to have 25 presets in total. Let's get into checking out some sounds. So let's have a listen to the actual raw samples first that I captured from the Sub Phatty. The Microfreak takes 16-bit 32 kilohertz samples. And for a little bit of comparison, what we sort of call professional audio that you might find on Spotify or on CD quality is usually at 44.1 kilohertz. So this slightly lower sample rate imparts a little bit of a retro lo-fi quality to the samples, which I think is kind of nice. So let's check out the first one. It's a sort of synth strings kind of thing. That's kind of what it sounds like. There it is. The next one is a sort of pad kind of thing. I added a sort of square wave modulation when I was designing it, so you'll hear a little bit of that. That's that one. And the third pure sample is a sort of synth lead that I made. It's got a 5th interval baked into it. Basically, I just set the second oscillator a 5th above the main one. And this is what it sounds like. There we go. For me, what's really exciting about this is the possibility of taking quasi-analog sounds, since it is technically a digital recording of an analog synth, and putting them into this machine. So at this point, consider that these are just the raw sounds. We really haven't started messing around with them in the way that the Microfreak can do. And this is what we're going to get into when we listen to the presets. So let's dive into what the preset sounds like next. Preset number 1 is called Grain Strings. Here it is. So for this one, I used the sort of synth strings sample, which was the first one that I showed you. I'm using the sample in the Cloud Grains engine in the Microfreak, and I've got an LFO going, which is affecting the grain density. I've also made a funny shape with the cycling envelope. I've set it simply to run, and that's affecting the filter cutoff. There's another fun thing with this. So there's a fun new parameter with a few of these grain sampling engines called Chaos, which just kind of makes things fun and chaotic. And I've mapped the key press as a modulation source to increase the chaos amount. So if I flatten my fingers, things start to get kind of cool and chaotic and funny and warbly and glitchy, and I like that. The second preset is called Pulsations. Here we go. So for this one, I used the second sample that I showed you, which was that sort of synth pad with the square wave modulation. And I'm using the hit grains engine from the Microfreak in this patch. And I actually want to specify that that beating that we're hearing, that like rhythmic effect, this isn't something in the sample, but it's actually an effect from the grain density parameter. If my understanding is not bad, the density of the grain affects how fast that grain is being played. So if you've got a lower density, it goes a little slower like this. But if it's higher, then it'll go faster. And what I've actually done is mapped the key press mod source to bring that grain density higher. To do stuff like that. So that's the second preset. Preset number 3 is a lead. I called it Gnarly lead. That's sort of what it sounds like. I've used the third sample that I showed you, which was that lead sound with the fifth. I'm just using the basic sampler engine in the Microfreak, but I've adjusted the loop parameter so that the note plays continuously. And as you heard just there, I've also mapped the key press to open up the filter cutoff and add a little bit of vibrato when you're playing as well. There it is. Preset number 4 is called Glippy keys. Sounds like this. And for this preset, I'm using the same sample as last time. It's again that sort of fifth lead sample. This time I'm using the scan grains engine. Relatively simple patch. I'm using the envelope to control the filter cutoff. Pretty basic stuff. I'm also using an LFO to modulate the grain density and what I believe is the scan speed. There is one other fun thing that I'm doing. With the new firmware update, there's a setting that you can check that transforms the key modulation source into strictly a sample and hold mod source. And so I've gone ahead and checked that off. And what that means is that every time you press the keyboard, a new random bipolar value is triggered instead of being a linear function of the keyboard. And so I've checked that off. I've mapped it to, I think it's the filter cutoff. And so if I press the same key and I keep pressing it, this is what happens. So that's a really fun part about this patch. All right, the fifth and last additional preset is called Falling. That's a little bit of what it sounds like. This is using the synth strings sample again, and I'm using the hit grains engine. And the main thing that's going on in this patch that you can probably hear is this sort of like speeding up effect that's happening as the sound decays away. Try to briefly explain how that's happening. The first step is, as I just said, I have a long decay in my envelope. And what I've done is I've mapped my envelope to modulate the grain density, but I've given it a negative value so that what happens is as the envelope decays, the grain density goes up and the grains start playing faster and faster. And that's the main thing going on in this patch that gives it its particular flavor. I do also have a sample and hold LFO going, and I am slightly modulating the filter cutoff and the pitch to give it a little bit of extra warbliness. Let's talk about how to get these presets onto your Microfreak. Because I'm also including my own audio samples, it's a little bit trickier than usual, but I'm going to walk you through it. When you download my preset pack, you'll see two files like this that both have this .mf and then some letters extension. You're going to need both of these files. Next, we're going to go to Arturia's MIDI Control Center application. I'm pretty sure it's a free download. You're going to want to open it, make sure your Microfreak is properly connected. I find it easiest to do this by USB cable. And so once your Microfreak is connected and you've opened up the software, you'll see this view, and you'll see one side is for the computer, one side is for the Microfreak. So we're starting in the Presets tab. You're going to want to click Import, Import New Project. We're going to go select the file that says g.lavo's Microfreak Presets Volume 1.1 .mfproj.z. Select that, open it, and now we can see it over on the computer side of the MIDI Control Center. This is the full pack of the 25 presets. So if you already downloaded the first version, the 5 new ones are at the very end here, numbers 21 to 25. And then you can simply drag and drop the presets to your synthesizer. Sort of like that. So that was the first step. Unfortunately, it seems like sample-based presets don't actually store their samples within them. They just point to the location of the sample, so we also need to transfer the samples. So at this point, we're going to click the Samples tab, and we're going to do basically the same thing. We're going to click Import, Import New Bank, and we're going to go find the file called g.lavo samples for microfreak.mfsbz. Click that, select it, open it. And then we have it. I have 2 versions here, which is why it's showing up as the second one. Once again, we're going to drag and drop our audio samples from the computer side over to the Microfreak side. And there we go. So that's all that we need to do on the computer. This last part will be to specify which sample you want your sample-based preset to use. And so the first thing is go to one of the presets that use a sample. Let's say I pick Pulsations. To specify the sample that you want to use, on your Microfreak, you're going to hold Shift and then start turning the type encoder. And this will bring you to sample selection, at which point you can select the appropriate sample for the preset. In this case, I want square mod P. And now we have that one. If you want to get out of the sample selection menu, you can again hold Shift and turn the type encoder, and then this will bring you back to selecting the audio engine that you're using within the Microfreak. I'm going to include a handy chart in the download for the updated preset pack that will tell you which sample goes with which preset. That way you can be sure to experience the sounds as I designed them. You can of course try it with other samples too, so don't feel as though you have to be limited to what I did. There's one last quick thing I wanted to mention. At the time that I'm filming this video, there seems to be a small bug with the 5.0 firmware update on the Microfreak. People, including myself, are having trouble transferring presets between the Microfreak and their computer. If you're transferring from a preset on the Microfreak that's number 385 or above that, you just get some kind of weird error message when you try to drag and drop stuff in between if you're transferring from that slot. The error message doesn't even really make a lot of sense. The workaround that I'm going to suggest at this point is just back up all your presets as much as you can, and then you may just have to kind of clear space in your lower numbered presets to transfer stuff back and forth. So thanks so much for sticking around to the end of this video if you did. This preset pack is completely free. You can find it in the link in the description of this video. I hope you enjoy messing around with these sounds and these presets. If you make anything cool, please feel free to tag me. It's always really interesting to see what people make with my sounds and how they interpret them into their own music. I've been Gab Lavoie / g.lavo.beats. I hope you liked this video. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.